Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're happy you're here. I'm Donna Hatch, Chair of the Government Study Committee, recording the meeting via Zoom. Is anyone else here recording? As many of you likely recall, at the special town meeting in October of 22, the town voted to authorize creation of the Government Study Committee appointed by the moderator to review all aspects of Hampden town government and to issue a report with any recommendations to the annual town meeting in May of 24. The first meeting of our committee was March 6, 23. And a year later, we delivered our warrant articles on March 6, 24, and our final full report on March 20. A year isn't much time, but we think we've accomplished a lot and have created a foundation for the next GSC to consider. Our task was to issue a report with findings and recommendations. The full report's on the town's website, and in it, you can find the what and the why of our conclusions. We looked at where we are as a town and how best to change to adapt to the future. In addition to the report, our recommendations are in the form of 5 warrant articles, which we're ready to discuss tonight. We created a summary document for use tonight also. Now the rest of the committee can introduce themselves, and I will turn it over to Keith to lead the discussion.
I'm Eric Brewer.
I'm Keith Pixley. Louis Severino.
John Matthews.
And we had one other board member, Michelle Boudreau, who's not here. She's at a different meeting. So this is a summary of the report that we had issued. That's posted on the website. This whole report's 30 some odd pages long. So what we've done is kind of boiled it down to a 6-page, 7-page summary. That kind of, it's just a summary. So it just summarizes what we've kind of arrived at. The full report's available on the website. So if you haven't seen it, there's a lot more in there than what we could get in here. But so we have proposed 5 warrant articles. We met with the selectmen on Monday, and our 5 warrant articles, I believe, are going to be on the warrant for town meeting, and we can go through them. The first one is the recommendation of the Government Study Committee is to increase the Board of Selectmen or Select Board, depending on if number 2 passes, from 3 members to 5. We arrived at that recommendation based on a variety of different factors. They're enumerated in the summary, but some of them were concerns that we had with the open meeting law with a board of 3. Open meeting law basically, if you can't have, every meeting has to be posted. So if you have 2 selectmen run into each other in the community, they're not supposed to really even be able to talk to each other. It makes it very difficult to have communication when you have 3 people and you can only have them communicate at a meeting that's been posted ahead of time. If you had a 5-member board, it could eliminate some of that. So if 2 selectmen were run into each other at Village Mart or somewhere else, or if they want to have a conversation, they can do that without violating the open meeting law. We felt as though that could actually help move things along faster and get things done better when we don't have to worry about not having a meeting posted anytime they may interact with each other. We think that adding 2 more people to the board could create a more diverse board that may represent the total of the town better. And that, with a board of 5, it would take 3 people would have to agree to make any type of different decisions, as opposed to when you have a board of 3. If one person wants to, if one person has something they want to have have happened, you know, you only have to have one other person agree to do it, and then it happens. So with a board of 5, I think it provides a little more protection for the town when decisions are made, because you have you have to have more voices in agreement to have something happen. With a board of 5 also, we had a lot of discussion about whether or not people would want, if you had a 5-person board, are we gonna be able to get 5 people to do that? I know for me, if it was myself, a young, you know, I'm not that young, but I'm 39. A board of 5 would be more attractive to me than a board of 3, because the workload is spread out amongst 5 people. You don't have to worry about open meeting law violations. If you have to miss a meeting, you could, if you have family commitments, if you have a kid who's sick and you can't make a selectmen's meeting. If you have 5 people on the board, there's just more shoulders to carry the load. And I think that you may have more people willing to serve on a board of 5 versus a board of 3. Time would tell with that. So that was some of the reasons that we are recommending that. I think maybe we should, if anyone has any questions about that, or if any of my colleagues would like to.
Yes, you mentioned all the positives that you considered positives. What's the downside?
So the downside could be if there aren't enough people that want to do it. That was a concern that we had when we talked about it, was, are there going to be 5 people that would want to serve on a board? I think it's a little bit of a concern. So that was one of the things that we had talked about as a potential negative. A potential negative could be what I had described originally as a positive, which is you have to have 3 people to agree on something. There was some concerns that we had heard that it takes, you know, things are moving slowly. Sometimes with 3 is adding 2 more people, 2 more voices in the room, going to speed things up. So there was some concern that maybe expanding the board might slow down a process that's already somewhat kind of slow sometimes. So that was something that we considered could have been a drawback. But we thought as a group that the potential positives outweighed those potential negatives, which is why we made the recommendation to increase. Yes.
Your opening statement, you mentioned that, you know, if 2 selectmen run into each other at the village mart, and that's really not a concern within the open meeting law. I mean, if 2 selectmen run into each other and they talk, you can see that Red Sox game last night.
Right.
It's not a violation. It's only a violation if they're in deliberation towards a decision. Yes, it can be appearance impropriety at some times.
Right. Right.
But you know, I don't think it's as critical as it seemed initially, as you had stated initially. The other thing about a 5-member board, I've tried to look at it both ways. And I have some perspective on it because I served on the board for 12 years.
Right.
Certainly one dominating person can influence the board unduly. So I can see an advantage of 5, but I see some disadvantages. And one of the things, if 2 members can talk independently, you can get kind of a chain talk going on. If you have one person that's very outspoken or very influential, let's say, he can call each of the 4 members separately. He can try to get them to his understanding, whereas in the 3-member board, they can't do that. So I'm not passing judgment on I'm trying to figure this whole thing out, why, you know, whether I'm to support it or not, but I'm just throwing out some of the other perspective I look at.
This was the single most debated suggestion in our entire deliberations. We went back and forth on this, and really only came to the conclusion that we would support a 5-member board near the end, after we'd heard lots of arguments from people, lots of opinions. And personally, my biggest concern is that if we can't get enough people to serve on boards and committees now, why do we think we're going to get enough to serve as selectmen? And I think in the end that my conclusion was same as Keith's, that a little bit lighter load, a little bit less feeling as responsible for the entire town would go a long ways to getting more people involved. We need to encourage more young people, even maybe younger than Keith, to get involved in town government. Because let's face it, all us old people, we can't carry the weight by ourselves anymore. You know, we need more young involvement.
Well, one thing that we just experienced, they had to hire a new town manager. None of the board members could talk about it because it would have created a quorum, which would have been illegal. So there is an advantage to be able to have 2 people to be able to talk and not have that quorum problem. Go ahead, Judge.
I think Jim hit the nail on the head. Just because it can be 2, the danger is a chain. And I think the state has talked about that and I think Dwayne has talked about it as well in the past, that with a multi-member board, you have the danger of establishing a chain violation. You know, A talks to B, then A talks to C. Well, therefore, there's the violation because it's a group violation. I think, Jim, that's kind of what you're talking about as an end around to all 3 being together.
Yes.
But the state talks about that still represents a violation because you've engaged a quorum in a conversation. And that could be a thing.
I'd just like to add to that, though, that at some point you need to trust your board. You know, like we have to trust a board of 3 right now. We'd have to trust a board of 5 too.
Follow the rule.
Yeah. Sorry, follow the rules.
Yeah.
The other thing to note is that this would be for 2025, whereas these 2 people, one would serve 1 year, one would serve 2, and then they'd get in the rotation. So after first year, you'd have to run again for your 3 years. After your second year, you'd have to run again for your 3 years. And then everybody, the existing 3 would still continue their rotation so that everybody gets to their 3.
One of the things that you mentioned with the town manager, that's new in the last few years. Prior to that burden was fully on the selectmen's office to perform their duties. And I'm not sure which way I'd vote on it, but I'm curious, what was the reaction of the current board when you presented it to them?
It was they want to know what the reaction was for the current board. Dwayne was asking, what was,
I guess that would be the answer from your committee.
Well, so we proposed that it be a warrant article and it's approved as one. I think that, I mean, I don't want to speak for the select board, but the warrant article that we proposed is going to be on the warrant. So, I think that when we had the discussion, I think there was varying opinions on it. It's just hard for me to.
if I could try and answer that, Dwayne, there was some consternation, I guess. There was some concerns about going from a 3 to 5 member board. Okay, I wasn't at the meeting, but I did watch it on Zoom. Okay, So what I got from the, looking at it from Zoom, there is a concern. We do have a new town administrator. And trying to let him, I'm going to say, stretch his legs a little bit.
And he's full-time.
And he's full-time. That was brought up, and reinforced a couple of times with that. So, do you really need a 5-member board, or do you need a 3-member board? Is a 3-member board going to operate sufficiently with the new town administrator that was appointed? Those are questions yet to be answered. So going forward, our committee, listened to what the select board had to say. And, we listened to both sides of the argument.
The new town manager, does he have the same responsibilities as Mr. Markle, or is he getting new management responsibilities and also picking up on the boat that sweating from?
We can't, as this board, we can't answer that question, okay? Because we don't know what his contract or commitments are. That was between the select board and
We were writing our report as onboarded. So we have no idea what his contract looks like. Mary Ellen?
When this goes to the town meeting, when all of these articles go to the town meeting, will the selectmen be asked for their recommendation? Or would they just be silent on it and it would be voted by the town?
As individuals, I think that I would welcome their opinion.
Pardon me?
As individuals, I would welcome their opinion. I doubt that they would take a position as the board. Advisory might, though.
I'm sorry, I was involved in conversations with my neighbors there.
That'll teach you.
Yeah, he just moved in.
You gotta pay attention.
Would advisory give a recommendation at town meeting for something like this, or would it all be as individuals
On the article itself,
on the article itself,
advisory,
or any of these?
advisory is obligated to give a recommendation on every article.
Okay. So,
Yes.
good.
so you're asking a question that really only the select them themselves can answer if they would like
If
to.
they would do it.
If they would answer independently, and yet this board has not come before the advisory, so at this point in time, advisory would not have a recommendation.
We probably should move on to the,
Yeah.
That's a good question. Historically, has the board ever been more than 3?
not in this town.
Did it start as a 3-member board?
It did.
I'd like to ask John.
Just a minute. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just wondering, I know, some surrounding communities within the state, have they looked at how many of the towns are increasing their boards to 5?
I hope I'm not breaking a confidence when I say that Wilbraham is looking at increasing to 5. I believe that the other towns right around us are 3. But I,
And
So-
across the state, it's 50-50.
50/50.
yeah,
Well, that's the amount of increasing pressures and what's required to run a town now, the challenges that they face. It might be due diligence to keep, right now, we don't have to go in time commitment.
So Robin, if you would speak up, but I'm gonna let you, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you said was with the increasing demands of running a town within the state, it might be better to move to 5-member board rather than 3.
Challenges are significant and have a terrific impact on this town.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask John, the first one on here is open meeting laws. Do you feel like in a general way that you guys run into problems with the open meeting laws?
I don't think so. I think the key part, as I said, and I think you saw in the paper, the key part is every one of our decisions are considered in public at a posted meeting and on the agenda. The only time we might make a suggestion, hey, person A, can we put this on the agenda for the next posted meeting? We don't ask for a decision. We don't ask for any discussion about it. But let's bring it up in front of the public.
Do you think as a selectman, you have too much to do?
No, I think, and I said in the meeting, although I think in the record will bear us out, we unanimously approved putting all the recommendations of the committee on the warrant for the town meeting in recognition of the work that they did. We may have personal feelings about each one or something, but they worked, you guys worked hard you people worked hard for over a year. So you deserve your day in public, your 15 minutes like Andy Warhol said, or whatever it was.
15 minutes of fame.
But I think, as I said in the meeting, we addressed, and Robin has a valid concern about all the things that step up. The town voting for a full-time town administrator stepped up and addressed that issue. But I'll speak to the lawyer there. That's not to be litigated here. You know, I think.
I think a town administrator who's skilled in that position, full-time,
Right.
kind of changes that dynamic of two
Exactly.
going on with the state.
Right. So.
I know that's a statement of the question. So.
Okay, so moving on to number two. Number two is changing the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board and Select Board Member. So the recommendations to have just what I said, to have the name change from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. There's a process that that the town would have to go through in order to do that. We had proposed originally the process that had been recommended by the town council to do it. At the selectmen's meeting on Monday, there was discussion about possibly an alternative way to do it that turns out we can't do because for various legal reasons. So the way that we would have to do it is you have to change the bylaw and the zoning bylaw. It's two separate processes. It may end up having to appear twice at two different town meetings because the way that to change the bylaw is not so hard. It's that can just go on and it can be voted on. To change the zoning bylaws, there's a few other things that have to happen that we don't know if there's enough time to do before the town meeting. So it may have to be a two-part process. But that's the second recommendation to change that. So I don't know if there's any questions on that or.
Any comments?
Is the main reason we're wanting to do this to be more sensitive to how the board is directed, is addressed, or more politically correct, or why would we change it if it's going to be a relatively cumbersome process to change?
Well, cumbersome is,
In the eyes of the beholder.
yeah. To be more inclusive, yeah. We're having enough trouble getting people involved in town government, and I think it's just a way of being more inclusive so that we get,
But it doesn't have any impact on.
No, it
state.
doesn't change anything.
No,
What we would do.
it's updating 85 instances in the general bylaws and the zoning bylaws. And if you look across the Commonwealth, a lot of cities and towns that have a select board are either select board, one word, or select board, select capital.
The interesting thing to me, since I was the one who counted the 85, was that 65 of them are in the zoning bylaw. The bylaws themselves are really not a big deal. And we could probably,
Would there be any cost associated with this? Anything have to be, reprinted or redone?
no. At least we couldn't find anything.
Right.
And one of the things that we have to, well, one of the hurdles, I guess, would be that planning board would have to have a public hearing.
Right.
And so given their schedule between now and May, that's like one of the impediments that might push the fall. It's really up to the board whether they do the general bylaws in May and the zoning bylaws in the fall, or push the whole thing to the fall or whatever. We haven't been informed of any decision on that yet.
The two votes require different. So to change the general bylaws of simple majority.
Right.
To change the zoning bylaws,
Two-thirds.
two-thirds. So there's a different benchmark you have to pass for that, for each also. So it does have to be two votes anyway.
One didn't pass for the other, that would be pretty awkward, wouldn't it?
Just weird.
Yeah, it wouldn't be great. It wouldn't be great. But
I'm not sure what I'm missing, but why would it require a change in the zoning bylaw?
Because Board of Selectmen or BOS or Board or Selectmen is used in the zoning bylaws as it is in the general bylaws. So if you're going to change one, you need to change the other. It's just a terminology update or a name convention.
The title of the office has changed.
The other way you can accomplish this is by having a town charter that just declares that this is the new name, but the process for doing a town charter is even more involved. So we were trying to avoid making things more complicated.
And MMA said for a town our size, there really is no reason to go through the headache of doing a charter. We were happy to hear that.
and it's because we don't have a town charter that we couldn't change it the way that was suggested at the selectmen's meeting on Monday. Okay, so third item is to make a change from having the town clerk, the treasurer, and the tax collector as an elected position to an appointed position. So this is kind of a two-part. So the town clerk will be changed from elected to appointed. The treasurer and the collector were actually, it's a two-part. We're recommending to combine those two positions into one and make it an appointed position. And the reasoning behind that is, and again, I said at the selectmen's meeting, and I'm going to say again, some of these recommendations, I hope it's not interpreted as a criticism of the people that we have doing the job now. It's absolutely not intended to be that way. Part of the recommendation for the change is the realization that we're not going to have those people forever, and we're going to have to be replacing some people. And what is the best way to do that? How do we make sure that we get the most qualified people in the position? Because there are very important roles for the town. If we're going to have people in those positions that are elected, they have to live within Hampden. They have to, and anyone could get elected. You may only have one person run, and there's no way to mandate or verify that the people would be qualified. Like we said, it's kind of a common theme. We have a hard time getting people to volunteer for boards and become involved. So if the position is appointed, what it would do is it would allow the town to create a job description, to post a job, to interview candidates that could come from outside of the borders of Hampden, and make sure that we have someone qualified and able to do those jobs. So that's the recommendation. That's some of the reasoning behind the recommendation. Combining the treasurer and the collector is something that's in Massachusetts has become extremely common. There are two jobs that have been combined often, as well as the trend has been to switch all of these positions from elected to appointed. And we have a little chart on here that kind of shows between 2014 and 2023, the appointment of treasurer and collector has gone from 248 communities to 308. So out of, I think there's 350 some odd towns in Massachusetts. Right now, 308 of them have moved those positions to appointed from elected. It's a trend that's happening everywhere. I think for a lot of the reasons I just described. Communities want to make sure that they have people that are qualified and able to do those jobs. And it seems like the best way to do that is to make it a position that's appointed. So I don't know if there's any questions on that.
I just want to say, in addition to what Keith said, that in no way does this, moving from elected to appointed preclude the folks that we have in positions now from being appointed. And this wouldn't take effect in 2025.
Yes.
Sharing my thoughts here. This is a huge pill to swallow, and I'm trying to break it into pieces and decide where I stand.
Right.
Just throwing out perspective. First of all, there was a little part in the report about what I call coincidence, that we have some people that are approaching retirement age, so to speak. They will not be running for those positions. And I don't think it should be a basis for any kind of decision of we should do this now.
It can't be.
Pardon?
It can't be.
No, but it's in the discussion point. So I'm just saying it seems like a superfluous discussion point. But the fact that, we seem to have trouble in the town getting people to run for volunteer positions or positions of reimbursement. And the treasurer, town clerk, et cetera, they do receive, tax collector, excuse me, they do receive compensation. So I don't think we would be a lack of people applying for the job. I do worry about the qualifications of, potential candidates. If we've only had one candidate that steps forward that's not qualified, certainly a concern. But my flip side concern is that I see happening everywhere, from local government to federal government, is an entrenched bureaucracy. People that are appointed to positions that just stay there by, year after year. It's difficult to remove them if people aren't happy with it. It's I grapple with that issue.
I take your point, but I guess I would argue that the same can happen with elected positions. We have a town clerk that's been in position for 20 some odd years, and it happens that we have a fantastic town clerk, we have a fantastic treasurer, but if we didn't, would it change? Would it change how the process? My guess is that people would still vote to return that person to office. And so I'm just saying that the entrenchment, I think, is inevitable to a certain extent, unless it takes people being involved to create change.
The one counterpart of that, and it's later in your proposals, is to have a recall
Yes.
possibility. So if it wasn't with an official, you're not stuck with that official for the entire term. And it's the voters that would make that decision, not a select board. It wouldn't be subject to some of the difficulties in removing an appointed or an elected official.
Mhm.
And I experienced something like that when I was on the board, where we removed somebody. It was a huge process.
Mhm. No, your point is well taken. If the town doesn't want to convert these to appointed positions, we, as a committee, would recommend a process that elected could be removed from office, which right now is not allowed.
Correct, but that's one of your later
It's
recommendations.
one of our recommendations for the next government study committee or
Right.
someone else in the town to undertake. Because it's not an easy thing to do a recall either.
No.
And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
But there's a couple of questions on the side there, just.
I add, in addition to what Jim said, I'd be fearful
taking away independent judgment opportunities from a position that's now elected if switched to appointed, creating perhaps an inability to exercise independent judgment and yielding to an unjustified loyalty to the appointing officer. It's like, I like the idea of recall. We're going to have that recommendation, whether appointed or not, because it's going to apply to select board. And I like to see more elected officers. I believe in diversifying power centers.
So I didn't mention when we were talking about the first one. What you just said is another reason why we thought a board of 5 would be better.
Yep.
Because when you're taking elected positions and turning them into appointed, you're exactly what you just said. We're putting more authority and sort of power decision-making with the Board of Selectmen. So I don't know how I forgot that or why I forgot it, but that was another one of the reasons why we thought increasing the board to 5 would be a good idea. Because if we're going to be giving them more authority over, positions that were previously elected, it may be a good idea to have more voices.
Maybe a good idea to expand to 5 even without changing elected to appointed
Right.
officers, because there might be too much power already concentrated in the triumvirate.
So, so that was that. And there's one more.
How long is an appointed position for?
So that would be up to I think that would be up to the board.
3 years.
Uh,
3 years?
I think it's up to the board, right?
It's up to the select
So
board
the select board would set the
term.
the job description, the terms, they would negotiate whatever contract it would be, they would do the interviewing. So that's how that would be done.
It'd be interesting if they're talking about a year, you're talking about 3 years. I mean, the first year, they're just getting used to the position. Next thing, they get kicked out and you gotta start over.
I think typically most positions are 3 years, but I don't think that's a hard and fast rule. I think it could be.
Well, our town administrator, I believe, is year by year, right, John?
3.
Town administrator is a 3-year contract.
3 years. Which is what I know.
I'm fairly certain.
I think the appointing authority is an important aspect to this discussion. And I think that if you look at the town manager, I don't know.
Town administrator.
Town administrator, if we're going to have a town administrator, it is hard for that person to run the show efficiently if some people report to the select board and some people report to the town administrator. So, I think it would be best, I would, and have you considered having the town administrator appoint those 2 positions and not and make the description and then hold them accountable, and the board would be holding the town administrator accountable for how the whole thing runs.
It's a little more complicated because the state sets the ground rules. The town administrator can, and we recommend town administrator should have the authority to recommend candidates. But in the end, the Board of Selectmen or Select Board has the final say. They are the town's official authority. And that
So
is.
they hire everybody in the town, all the different positions, or just?
In the end, they do. They are at the peak. And that is determined by state law, not by us, Mass General laws.
And then the town
Is that-
administrator does.
isn't that your understanding?
The job they're performing,
Excuse me?
the town administrator then does the assessment of the job that the
Yes.
people are
Yes.
doing. So he or she retains that,
Yes.
even under the system, even under the board. But
There was another question over here.
Yeah, I was just concerned about who was doing the appointing. And it would be the town administrator.
Well, town administrator recommends, and then the Board of Selectmen actually appoints.
and the Board of Selectmen being from him.
Yeah.
If you're looking for them as people in these appointed positions.
So the,
Go ahead, Keith.
so the Hampden's Board of Selectmen appoints the people who are gonna be working for the town of Hampden. If it's an appointed position, the person being appointed does not have to be a Hampden resident. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. In order to run, to be elected for these positions, you have to be a resident of the town. So by making it appointed, you could potentially open up the
candidate.
candidate pool to people who are living, I mean, you could have a treasurer that lives in Wilbraham or lives in Munson. Doesn't have to be somebody from Hampden. That same person from Wilbraham or Munson, if it was elected, could not run to be the treasurer in Hampden unless they move to the town of Hampden. So,
And these positions are becoming highly skilled and more technical. And, you know, there's people that have the skill sets and the training to fulfill these roles. And we just think it's important that the town is able to avail itself to the best candidate. If the best candidate lives in Hampden, great. But if the best candidate lives outside the borders of Hampden, we should have that opportunity to make that decision.
I think part of what we had talked about too was there could be a lot of people who might want to apply for a job, make their resume, and if there's a posting, make an application and apply and interview. There may not be so many people who want to deal with running and having their name on a sign and having to deal with a public election. And what if they lose? I mean, so I think there could be a built-in sort of impediment to getting a lot of people who might not want to deal with that may not have the same reservations about applying for a posted job and interviewing, going through that process. And that was part of another, I mean, there was a multitude of reasons why we thought that it was a good idea to do this. And we've talked about a lot of them. That was just another one.
Go on, John.
One quick point, Keith, and tell me if I'm wrong. I don't want people to be confused by the appointment versus appointment. Board of Selectmen appoints people to committees. I think kind of what the committee here is talking about, actually, these are hirings.
Right.
And we're calling them appointment, but they're technical.
Yep.
And somebody talked before about, does the selectman do all the appointments? No. The planning board appoints their clerk, i.e. hires a planning board clerk.
Right.
The parks hires their clerk. I think the committee here is talking about, yes, these are technically appointments,
right,
but we're going out and hiring the best person for these jobs. And they're recommending we expand the pool of qualified applicants. Because the danger is, as the town changes, those qualified applicants, they're getting smaller and smaller. Did I summarize, did I say that right?
No,
Okay.
So if I could just add to that, those people that, again, that would be appointed to those positions, okay, they would fall under the town manager or the town administrator. He would be the boss, if you will. It's not up to the Board of Selectmen or Select Board, okay, to go down and say, treasurer, collector, you know, we want you to do this. It's really up to that town administrator to delegate that authority of what they want.
Do these people need to live within Massachusetts, or can they be Stafford or both places on the borders, or?
Anywhere.
Yeah, because if you're actually hiring somebody, it doesn't have to be within borders. Yeah.
And just to clarify, like you two guys just said, an appointee becomes a town employee.
Correct.
And so all the guidelines that follow an employee would take place. So there was some concern about whether that person would have loyalties to someone. It's just like any other town hire. It's just like any other employee.
Correct.
And
That
some-
town administrator would have the ability to fire that person. I'm saying, you know, maybe with discussions from the select board, but yeah, they would have that ability to, you know, fire.
And some of these positions follow mass general law.
Just caution that the role of our town administrator is still in the process of being
Yes.
defined.
Yeah.
So to say that the administrator would have the authority to do X, Y, or Z, I think maybe overstating the situation.
And we don't even know what, if
Yeah.
these don't pass or if they pass, then there's negotiations that have to take place.
And
So,
if you avail yourself to the full report, we propose bylaws for the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator, and they're appendix A and B in the back of this document.
To define those roles.
For those of you who need some way to get to sleep at night.
This was a test to see who read the report.
So number 4, I already sort of touched on it, but it's combining the treasurer and collector to what would have been historically 2 separate positions, combine them into one. Very common happening in Massachusetts and beyond.
In 23, Ludlow just passed combo.
Right.
My understanding is Holyoke's looking at it now.
What's the reason for combining?
Efficiencies.
So they have, their duties are, they dovetail each other, so,
They're very discrete responsibilities. I'm just wondering, is there something inefficient about having the way we're set up now with this?
I don't have a good answer for that. I've wondered the same thing. I mean, in Hampden, we have 2 halftime positions. And so obviously it would have the benefit of creating 1 position.
It's kind of like putting all the eggs in one basket, though, isn't it?
Well, except that, as you said, they have very discrete responsibilities. And those positions, both of them, are pretty highly defined by Mass General Law. So I'm not terribly worried about it, but I'd like to hear the logic personally among all the other towns. I mean, it is, as Keith said, it is overwhelmingly the way the state is going. But the question is, why? And I don't have a good answer for that.
That's not persuasive to me in the least. There's a lot of things on in the state, but I want nothing to do with it. So
Fair enough.
unless there's something on an articulated basis, some shortcoming in the existing structure, I don't see any reason to fix a problem that doesn't exist.
Mhm. Guess we better sharpen up our thinking.
So you're saying the 2 part-time positions now,
Yes,
are they benefited positions? And then with the full-time position, you're going to have to provide benefits. Correct?
I believe they're benefited now, aren't they?
20 hours gets benefits
Yeah.
by statute.
But the elected positions such as the treasurer, the tax collector, and I do not believe that they get the holidays pay and stuff like that. They're paid a single salary.
True.
They're eligible for the medical.
Yes.
Combine the treasurer and the tax collector. Will this mean that the combined position would have the same amount of hours so that the town clerk, say the town clerk now makes $30,000. The town clerk and the tax collector are one and the same, so they're going to make $60,000. Is it going to be the treasurer now is going to make 60,000 and the town clerk is going to make 30? I'm just putting those figures as.
Sure, as placeholders. The salaries we're not saying anything about the salaries. Those are determined by the selectmen.
And the skill set of the candidate and
Right.
all of that.
So,
And will it require more hours for the treasurer then? I mean, because it must, because it takes the town clerk places around to do the two jobs as it does to do one. So
Right.
I'm figuring the treasurer is going to have to have a lot more hours.
certainly it shuffles around the roles of their assistants. So yes, it definitely means hours shift, job responsibilities shift. One of the things that we would like to see is more cross-training between assistants so that, one of the issues that we see now is that there are workload ebbs and flows, and it would be nice if the ebb happened to meet the flow at the sense so that you could even out the workload among the staff. And right now, because these people, the assistants, report to different elected positions, technically the town administrator has very limited authority over those people because their bosses are elected. One of the things that this would change is that, as someone said, they would just become town employees, which means that they all report to the town administrator. And that allows more flexibility. Now, I'm not saying that Hampden hasn't done a lot of this anyway, but it provides a better structure for administrating human resources, quote unquote, in the town.
So in the town of Hampden, a 20-hour position gets full-time benefits.
Yes.
State law.
Yeah,
State law,
right.
like, just that surprises me.
And so
Good kudos to them, but I think combining the positions, there's a little savings there, but also you may get a more qualified candidate going from a full-time person with a better
So-
skill set.
Right.
To part-time.
That's our.
So that's also part, so to sort of answer, I think what was a question that might not have been fully answered. These jobs, as they are right now, have a amount of time. They're 2 20-hour-a-week jobs that we'd be combining into 1 40-hour. So we're not really increasing the number of hours at all. We're just putting the responsibility all in one place as opposed to 2 separate places. So it's, I guess if you're the now treasurer / collector, yet that person's going to be working 20 hours more than they were before, but we've eliminated a 20-hour position and made it into a 40-hour position combined with another 20. I don't know if I think I just confused myself,
The
actually.
net hours are the same,
The net hours are the same. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
but it gives Hampden a competitive advantage. Like, I don't know if anybody noticed in the news recently that Southwick has a combined clerk, treasurer, and collector into one person. They've combined all 3. Ludlow in 23 combined the 2.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't. You guys have to go in front of the advisory board and make your case.
Yeah.
I would suggest before you do that, make some calls to the other towns and find out why. You also get some numbers on whether it's gonna cost money or save money if you combine these 2. Because ultimately, these guys have a big say in whether you get a bus here.
Well, we stayed away from the money and salaries and all of that as part of our process.
If you gave a general idea to them, that it's gonna save or cost, save money or cost us. I think that's right.
I'm concerned about the changing of this because right now we have an assistant town clerk. And there's also a very part-time person who helps out in the town clerk's office. And now that the tax collector is not going to be in the same office as the town clerk, does that mean that we may have to have another employee at least part-time because this is split? So they're not in the same office and doing the same things as the assistant town clerk is also taking money when you go to pay the taxes. The assistant town clerk is just as capable of taking them as the town clerk tax collector is. So are we looking at another employee?
Anybody want to take that? We didn't look at it that in depth. We just looked at it as the town is functioning now. And if we do this combination versus this combination, then downstream, we just divide the labor a little bit differently based on the current landscape. But once you go to appointments, the landscape is likely to look different. And then that might require different decisions by the town administrator and the board.
Anything else? Good. We forgot one thing, though. The efficiencies maybe will reduce the number of hours. I'm only kidding. We'll move on. Go ahead.
So the last warrant article, is talking about alternate voting methods at town meeting. So this is town meeting only, not general town elections. This is just a town meeting. And what we've suggested is to amend the bylaw to allow for other methods of voting. So we had talked about potentially having a electronic voting system at town meeting, where a lot of towns have done it, where you get, as opposed to just getting the card you hold up, you get a small little clicker type device where it has 2 or 3 buttons on it. Yes, no, abstain or something. And that's how you vote. This bylaw change does not mandate that. It doesn't require it. It just allows for it or other ways of voting besides just a show of hands. Part of the reason we talked about alternate voting methods at town meeting is there was concerns across, it's been a common theme, concerns about public participation in the town government. Town meeting is one place where I know where everyone votes, your vote is public, you're sitting next to somebody who may be asking for something, and it's hard sometimes to hold up a card saying no, looking at the person who just asked you to vote for their thing. We think that if we had a method of voting that wasn't necessarily you're wearing your vote on your sleeve or holding it up in the air, that you may get more people who'd be apt to come to a town meeting if they didn't think that they may feel pressure to vote publicly one way or another. An electronic voting system may help with that issue. But again, this question doesn't mandate that. It just allows for an alternate voting method. Now, when we were at the meeting on Monday, at the selectmen's meeting, there was some talk about this and whether or not if the town did enter into some sort of electronic voting, any voting method at town meeting is the moderator would decide how the votes are going to be done. So if the town got an electronic voting system and something happened, the system crashed or the batteries ran out, it doesn't mean you can't vote. You can still go back to raising your hands. This doesn't take that away. It just opens for other possible ways to have votes counted. Whether or not whatever alternate method there may be would be a decision that the Board of Selectmen would have to make. But we believe that a good way to get maybe more participation at a town meeting would be to have a different way of voting where it's a little more private, not so public. There is also a little concern that people may vote at a town meeting. When hands start to go up, all of a sudden everybody's hands go up. And I don't know if that's something that if the votes were, if people that were sitting there weren't swayed by seeing literally everyone voting in one way, that you may see votes that are a little more not 100% unanimous every time. Because I think one thing everybody can agree on is that we all can't agree on anything. And it seems like at town meetings, there's a lot of votes that are unanimous, and it's hard for me to believe that everyone in there is agreeing on everything all the time, because that's the only place that seems to happen. So I think if we had an alternative voting system, people could really vote the way that they feel and not feel public pressure about doing it, and not be swayed by what their people sitting next to them are doing. So this would allow for an alternate method.
Do you have any idea what the cost factor is to get the units and how many hundred you would need for a full meeting if somebody showed up? And then how is the charging of these units? I mean, are they just battery operated? Batteries on them?
It's a changing landscape. That we know of, there are 3 vendors that are selling these systems or leasing or renting. And then it was suggested at the select board meeting that we might be able to work with one or more other towns and do kind of a group purchase, since I think it was John that pointed out that if we only hold a couple of town meetings a year, most towns do the same. So there's not a lot of reason to spend a lot of money on something that we could share among 4 or 5 towns, maybe. That makes it a little difficult to estimate costs. The prices have been coming down. I did look at some preliminary estimates, and it for a typical town meeting, I came up with around $20,000 for all the clickers plus a central station, but prices are changing constantly. You know, we've got inflation going up, we've got technology bringing prices down. I would not commit to any of the prices that I found at the time.
Why couldn't we work out a system with the town website where people that are, say, shut-ins, they're registered voters, we're being recorded here, give them a passcode, give a passcode to the registered voters, and they could vote at town meeting.
So
Those that in town that are not registered voters don't get the passcode.
So what you're talking about, potentially what we're suggesting might be able, so what we're suggesting is allowing alternate voting methods. What they are is to be determined at a later date. Maybe someday it could involve something like what you're speaking of. We didn't look into that specifically, but the bylaw change that we're proposing could allow for that in the future. It's not just an electronic voting. It's not limited to that. It could go beyond that. It would be up to the Board of Selectmen, and I think probably the moderator, to decide what method of voting they want to use. But this bylaw change allows for greater flexibility in how the method and how we're going to count our votes at the town meeting.
I will add, though, that as a computer security guy, I would be violently opposed to that, at least at the current with current technologies.
We do list that as a consideration for the next government study committee, like remote voting, which is what I think you're talking about. But I do think that there is a mass law against that. So,
Against it?
yeah, against remote voting, because you can't,
Actually, kind of meeting.
yeah. Because you can't determine who's actually voting.
Right. At the other end of the computer, you could have somebody with a gun pointed at your head and forcing you to vote for,
Well, yeah.
whatever.
But you would.
But that's a consideration for the next government study committee, because it needs more work and we were just plain flat out of time.
Yes.
My concern was is the lack of definitiveness to the open to other choices, because it just leaves it wide open. What choices could come down the road? What could,
Well, do you trust your selectmen?
not with something like that, no.
And moderator,
Yeah,
because actually,
No,
because that's where the decision would be. This is just to enable.
Personally, I would like to see what that is in the bylaw itself.
Let's say, excuse me, I don't understand what you're saying, Jim. What you want to see in the bylaw itself?
If you're opening the bylaw, right now it's,
show of hands.
there's by, it can be requested by ballot at a meeting, it can be,
Right.
it can be,
Sure.
we had a meeting where there was a secret ballot required.
Yeah,
So, but by saying, or you're opening it to other means, but you don't define what those means are, and that troubles me.
In the full report. What the
Last page. In the, see if the town would amend the total of the town bylaws by deleting the text of subsection D of section 1 of chapter 2, town meetings, and replacing that text with the following. All votes or motions shall be taken by a show of hands, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the existing bylaw, the proposal is subject to the availability of a system to enable electronic voting. Nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent the moderator at his/her discretion from counting the vote on any matter before the town meeting by use of such system. That's the
It
proposal.
doesn't define what those systems are.
No, because that is beyond our scope at this point. The first step is to change the bylaw to enable an alternative method. Once you've enabled the alternative method, then selectmen can go and investigate the 3 vendors and make decisions from there. But you can't do anything until you amend the bylaw.
I don't think the bylaw has to specify the vendor.
No.
It doesn't
no,
specify the
doesn't.
vendor.
You just said it. It
Well,
allow-
there's three vendors nationally. So, the next progression would be for the board to investigate. And you're not just gonna, I wouldn't think, pick one. You would at least investigate 2 out of the 3 for pricing, quality, consistency, whatever else goes with that. However else they make a purchase.
I'll just make a point like you said, so you enable it by cell phone rather than by control and clickers. Or something, that there's a lack of control. And I'm just worried about opening the door to a nebulous statement of, and I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but when I read it, it struck me as nebulous. That's my only point.
Yep.
Well, that is from the town attorney. So
Well, it's still nebulous.
it's what it is.
It is nebulous, and it's because we are trusting in the end, the Board of Selectmen and the moderator to look out for our interests, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be open to discussions, public hearings on a chosen method. I would hope that they would, because I agree with the concern of using cell phones or anything else that isn't tightly controlled. Like I say, I'm a computer security person. That's
we didn't even think about using cell phones. We were looking
Yeah,
at
I just-
like
just an example.
a closed system. The whole thing is in, you know, at least the one that I looked, or a couple that I looked at, is like, would be contained in this room. End of story.
Nebulous, that's end of my story.
Yep.
No, the only comment I have is that, you know, it would be a one-time purchase, hopefully in use by other towns, you know, so that would cut the cost one time. It would be very accurate in county
Yeah.
votes as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And we've discussed many times, like, in what world is there 90, 95, 98%, you know, approval? It'd be interesting to see, you know, if people are actually voting what they think, and their neighbors aren't gonna know what the actual vote looks like.
Be opposed to voting for something that's going to cost us money. And we don't know how much money we're going to spend. We don't know how much this is going to cost us, 20,000, 30,000. Whatever.
You're not voting for electronic voting at this point. You're just voting to enable the opportunity for that.
Who's going to be the electronic vote task force? Is it going to be a government study committee or to another committee?
Perhaps the selectmen would appoint a task force to do the research. If you know, can see on page 5, some of what we took from the Long Meadows electronic voting task force is the cities and towns as of December 21 that were already doing this. Long Meadow in 21 opted for this, as have many other cities and towns.
We recommended that the Board of Selectmen appoint a committee consisting of at least the town clerk, the town treasurer, and several people from the community, town administrator, to investigate and, if appropriate, purchase a system.
I'd like to see the moderator on
Yeah, I don't remember the full list, but I think it's in I believe it's in the full report. Moderator.
Anybody else?
The number 6 here, the move to a strong town administrator. I'm not sure we want to go through a lot there because without seeing the appendix A and B, I think John and I believe all the selectmen would believe that we are moving to a stronger town administrator by virtue of the fact that our new town administrator is full-time.
But that's not a warrant article question.
No, we're at the end of our warrant article question.
Yeah.
And unless somebody else up here has something else to say, I would open it up because we've only got about 15 minutes left to questions on any of these or comments.
First, I want to thank all of you for putting this. I've been on committees board before. I've presented alternative thoughts. I haven't made up my mind on some of this stuff. The town administrator, the one part in there that concerned me, what you put together so far, was their role as the human resources person.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of the chicken in charge of the hen house. I mean, I've always thought of human resources as being that kind of buffer between the strong tyrannical management and the employees.
Mhm.
And now you have a strong town administrator that's dictating to all the employees, and also in charge of That, so just, maybe that could be something that could be like a shared human resources that's done between multiple towns, like a health officer. And I know in the past, I know Carol Fitzgerald did a lot of human resource work years ago. I don't know, Doug, the advisory committee, like some.
We try not to hold the personnel.
Yeah, but just a concern.
Yeah, it is, in larger towns, there is an HR person. We actually discussed that briefly, but we are trying to stay away from mandating increased staff.
And we
That's
did,
not our job.
we did hear throughout the year repeatedly that the town needs someone to manage
Someone.
HR,
And I don't disagree with that.
you know, and that it's really lacking. And so our best option, given that we were hesitant to create a new position would be great, but then that has a lot of stuff that comes with it that people aren't ready for. So if you have to put it somewhere, we thought the town administrator was the best place.
I'm concerned about the wording in your overview, and it's bullet number that's related to the town administrator. So I think that the wording is really questionable because it reads that we have had a town administrator. Hampden has had a relatively new today. And to my, how I'm reading that is that the previous and only TA that we had, that this infers that that person was speaking, that person was.
No.
So I take issue with, that it should say relatively new TA position. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And in the full report, I think we go through a lot more description. Strong and weak town administrators, that's the terminology used by the Mass Municipal Management Association.
I just feel like this kind of directs criticism
Well,
to our.
It's not the person, it's the position and how the position
Yeah.
is allowed to.
I'll take the
function.
blame for that though, because I'm the one who reduced the overview section in particular, turned it into bullets.
Just don't do it.
So the town administrator, Bob was there, was doing like 24, 25 hours a week.
Yes.
And now what has come and changed that now this position is going to be a 40 hour
I believe it's 35, isn't it, Don?
or whatever.
The position,
The hours?
Yeah.
TA,
35.
35 or 40, I think,
or is it 40?
40. I don't
One of
know.
the two.
I wouldn't agree with that characterization that we had a weak TA, either Mary or Bob.
Mary was the first town administrator we had. And then Bob.
Forget.
Yes.
So we're on our third now. That's okay. Yeah.
Let's change that dictated 25 to a 40 hour.
Bob took the position, he was only allowed to work 25 hours. The position was supposed to be a full-time position originally when the town created the position.
Well, the funds were there, but working with him and discussing, he said, we're about 25 hours a week.
Yeah.
And he got the job done. So I didn't know what changed that already bumped it to a 40.
I think that there's disagreement on whether he got the job done. He got everything done that he could get done within 25 hours.
So that's really neither here nor there, what's been done in the past.
Yeah, no,
Right.
Okay.
I just didn't know what the increased responsibilities
Yes.
That's up to,
dictated.
you're asking the wrong. Sorry.
And by the way, I like Bob a lot, so that I didn't mean that as a criticism
No,
of Bob Markle.
very good.
He's very good.
I would like to commend you on all the work that you've done and the thoroughness of it and the professional presentation that you've made. I think that going
a step further into the defining of responsibilities is absolutely the next step that needs to happen. So that everybody knows what the TA is supposed to be doing, the treasurer, whoever it is supposed to be doing. But you really, you're all volunteers like the rest of us. You've done a great job.
Well, lucky for you, we have Appendix A and Appendix B. And when you look at your entire printout, you'll see that starting on page 25
Yes.
of the full report, 25 through
Way too long.
30, we propose bylaws that outline the responsibility of the board and the responsibility of the town administrator. And the town administrator, to Jim's point, does include responsibility for HR. I've said before, we've heard over and over and over that that's just a critical function that. The portable version.
I too would like to commend you both for the work you've done. And part of this brings to my attention that the town has grown a lot in the last 20 years. From an $8 million budget to around 15 now, but we're still at 5,000 people. And all of these considerations that are being brought forward, how do they fit?
The town is still 5,000 people. We have about half as many school children as we had. And therefore, we could say that the town is aging somewhat. The responsibilities, as you said, the budget is now twice as the size it used to be. The state requirements of town officials, town clerk, treasurer, have increased, God knows how much. This is the first government study committee that the town of Hampden has ever had. We don't think should not be considered the last government study committee. We need another one soon. And we need it to be a recurring thing. Because the world is changing. The state is very unlikely to ever return money or power to towns. So we need to be able to change with the time and figure out how to work within the constraints that the state gives us. One of the problems with the way Massachusetts is organized, as everyone knows, is that town governments exist at the pleasure of the state government. Literally. Because we're in a commonwealth. So
given our short time of 1 year, in the longer version, we also, and I think that actually might even be in this version, we have other items for consideration of the next government study committee. We also think, given our experience, that the next government study committee should maybe be 10 people. So you can break into subgroups and go off and do some more in-depth. And looking at other cities and towns, a lot of those government study committees that are underway there had 3 years, if not 5 years, and many extensions. So given our time of 1 year, we are where we are. What we've proposed is what we feel is the best thing to move the town forward, year 2025 and out from there. And, there's more work to be done. This is just a start.
Sorry to go back a little bit, though, but the town administrator, you're talking, it is a 35 or 40 hours a week, 37 and a half? What is, well, it kind of matters. What is our administrative work?
Time out. You're asking the wrong group. Okay, we did not negotiate. I know, but
Anyhow, so we stepped up and Mary Ellen will know that we had a part-time thing. Bob was limited because of his pension setup, that he could only work 24 hours, was it, or 20? 20, because he was limited to how many hours he could work during the year. So when we went out for a new hire, the town had authorized a full-time town administrator back in 2017, 2018, and that's when we got Mary. So I'd have to check the contract we wrote because of the fact that, the town hall's not open on Friday, but he's working hours on Friday. So it's either 35 or I believe it's full-time 40 hours.
So what is the remaining town employees who work full-time? Are they 35, 37 in the town?
They have different, depending on the job, there are different hours.
Right.
Really, right, because some jobs require different hours.
I
You can
mean,
consider the admin assistant for planning full-time, but I don't know,
20 hours.
20 hours.
And again, we can go to the highway department where they're 40 hours. So those are all town.
Usually difference between administrative and then facilities or operation.
So there's a difference. There's a difference. There's definitely a difference. And it depends on the workloads that are encumbered.
And the
Okay,
job description.
the job description. So when I say 20 hours, that might be combined for two boards that counted, that town employee may be serving. Okay.
It says proposed warrant articles. Are these 5 on the ballot for the May meeting?
We proposed, because that was our role. Our role was to submit a report with recommendations, and our recommendations are in the form of proposed warrant articles. It's really up to the Board of Selectmen to decide what went on the warrant, and our understanding is that they're putting all 5 on. John, you can correct me if
There's a draft copy. They have all 5 on right now. We're still putting the warrant to bed. We're discussing it again on Monday. As I think Keith talked about, there's a concern about the timing for the bylaw modification, which may predicate pushing that to the fall, if I'm.
Yeah.
That's the only one I think is in question at this point, just because of timing that's required. So I think, in my personal opinion, if you were doing the bylaw change, you'd do them as a pair at the same time. You'd hate to make one change and not the other, so maybe they both to the fall, but it allows the government study committee, if you leave them on there, to make the explanation of why they're there. Right. But at this point, we've accepted all the recommendations.
any last comments? We just have a couple minutes left. Comments, questions?
I'd like to make just one last comment if I could.
Sure.
This was a very great group of people that I was able to work with, okay? Their work was, and in the report was excellent. But what I'd like to really say is, if you read the report, it at least gives the people in the town something to think about, okay? You should go away, every townsperson that reads it should go away and with something to think about of how the government in this town, our community, works and how maybe it can be made to work better.
Are you planning to do anything to get this out to the whole community? Because the biggest question, the biggest comment you hear from people is, I didn't know there was a planning. What are we talking about here? Not because you haven't done things, because you certainly have. The second meeting I've been to.
Right.
Particularly that you've had, and there could have been 100 people here. But is there a way so we can do that other than just?
We talked about,
Yeah, but they don't know.
so you need to tell 10 people, everybody here needs to tell 10 people.
Yeah, but you know.
And they need to tell 10 people. No, we talked about putting copies of the summary at the library and at the senior center.
Put those there.
We're gonna put some of these
Yeah.
here, there. And
That's good. Over the senior.
we've sent notices to the reminder. Say that again?
If you need to, I'll go door to door, but I think people have.
We'd be happy to make you
because
some
they-
copies to go door to door.
Huh?
We'd be happy to make you copies to go door to door.
Okay.
Okay, one last question for everybody. Who's on the next government study committee? Starts in July.
Don wants to
I
make.
want to make one quick point. I want to make one quick point. I'm not here representing the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
The committee obviously wants to make sure as many people can see this as possible. They wanted to put it on Zoom. We have no Zoom operator. We drew straws at the selectmen's meeting. I got the short straw. I'm here. You know, Don is Mr. Tech. He wanted to be here, but he didn't win the thing. So I answered questions to the best of my ability. I did not answer them as the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Except when I could. So I want to personally thank the committee for their work. You know, this is a great thing. People stepped up, and especially the new members of the committee who this might be their first try at public service. We thank them, really do.
Yep.
So,
Thank you. Oh, well,
Everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Really appreciate it.